I forgot to give you your videos. I've got 2 videos. We can still play them from here, right?
Yeah.
Okay, that'll be fine.
Not according to that one. Not according to that one.
Well, mine's apparently off then.
Yours says 8 o'clock already?
No, mine says 7:59.
Yeah, well, that's already run.
Okay.
I started it a hair early because I wanted to go shut that door.
It's all right. I already believe time is an artificial construct anyway.
Yeah. It's all relative. How fast are you going?
Yeah, precisely.
I'm going to mute you for now.
And there's intimacy on the radio, and there's naturalness on the radio that can never be replicated on TV. The marvelous resurgence of radio as a political force in this country.
News-related radio programming is evolving.
There's a huge hole in our dialogue that can be filled by the synthesis of traditional radio and the freedom that comes from a live podcast. You're about to experience Cowboy State Politics live. Here we go. Good morning, my friends, and welcome to another incredible installment from very high above all the puerile and insipid forms of Wyoming mainstream media. This is Cowboy State Politics. I, of course, am your illustrious host, David Iverson, firmly ensconced behind the silver Cowboy State Politics microphone and broadcasting to you from the base of the Bighorns at the Cowboy State Politics studio in Sheridan, Wyoming. Good morning, my friends, and welcome to the program. Happy Wednesday. If you want to be part of the show this morning, the phone number here in the studio is 307-374-8989, 307-374-8989. We've got kind of a busy show this morning, so we're going to take some calls this morning, hopefully, and then we'll just kind of see how it goes. But here's the game plan. We'll do the show as normal in the first hour, and then the second hour, I'm going to play for you that interview with Peter Cousins, the author of the book, where is it? This book, Deadwood, Gold, Guns, and Greed in the American West. I've been meaning to play this interview for you, and I know I've teased it a couple of times, but we had some other stuff come up last week, so we're going to play that interview for you in the second hour. So be looking ahead to that one. It's a pretty entertaining interview, I think, and there's some things that you may learn about Deadwood. So we'll do that in the second hour. But we begin this morning with a little local news. And we often hear in Wyoming that, oh, that doesn't happen here. This is Wyoming, and that stuff, that terrible stuff, well, it just doesn't happen here. But it appears that in Sheridan, Wyoming, we have some people who think that all of us radical right-wingers are a bunch of Nazis. Now, in this case, the new Turning Point chapter at the Sheridan College put on a vigil for Charlie Kirk. It was last week. I went there. I thought it was a great event. I didn't count how many people were there, but I'm guessing at least 200. At the college, they've got this kind of center square out there. They call it Whitney Mall. And they've got some, stair-stepped seating there, and it was all jam-packed full. And all it was just a little prayer, a little singing, and a few of the students talking about their beliefs. I thought it was a great event. Well, prior to the event, the Sheridan Press did a little blurb on it for them, and they called it "Vigil for Charlie Kirk set for Friday." And well, one of the comments on it wasn't exactly kosher. And you can see if you read down through it, there's a guy down at the bottom. It says Josh Hansen. And I'll tell you about him in just a second. Cool. Nazi rallies at the college. Well, that's pretty great, huh? A bunch of people that are going to get together and pray. Yeah, they're just Nazis. And here's the next one. Of course, you see a couple of folks get on to him about his comment. And then it is revealed that he's actually a teacher. Josh Hansen is employed by the Sheridan County School District number 2, and he teaches at the Schiffer School, which is an alternative school at the college. Now, I mean, I think, Ken, that we should have some conversations about this, because all last week and pretty much the week before, we were talking about free speech, and undoubtedly, one of the people that I greatly admire, Charlie Kirk, was killed because the other side couldn't shut him up. That's why he was killed. He was killed for what he said and what he believed. And because, I mean, he was one of those people that whatever he believed came out of his mouth, and rightfully so. And, as the left often thinks, well, if they can't debate you, let's just shut you up. And so to me, this teacher, it's a question of free speech, in that I do not think this is free speech, because Mr. Josh Hansen is an employee of the school district. And every school district that I've ever had anything to do with, been involved with, talked about, they all have a social media policy. And I don't think that I couldn't find it last night. I did look to see if I could find their social media policy, but Sheridan County School District number 2 had a little bit of trouble finding it. So maybe it exists, maybe it doesn't. But the truth is, this guy is in a position of authority teaching at the alternative school, and he's posting on social media that, and it doesn't say all of us right-wingers. It says, the people that are going to attend this vigil are Nazis. And so the question is, and this is not just Wyoming. This sort of stuff is happening, all over the country, where, there's a variety of people, I would say pretty stupid people, posting comments like this all over social media. Now, let me just add one more layer on top of this. Now, this is an email that I was sent, and I got all this the other night. A listener of Cowboy State Politics sent me all of these screenshots, because I didn't even know this was going on until this hit my inbox. But go ahead and take a look at this one. So this is an email that is obviously sent to a guy named Mike Swan. Mike Swan is the principal at the Schiffer School, and if I'm not mistaken, he's also a principal in Bighorn. Don't quote me on that one. But it says, this is from Mike Swan, and he's replying to whomever sent him these posts. And it says, "Thank you for bringing this to my attention. I was unaware of the matter until now. I've just spoken with Mr. Hansen about taking it down, and he has agreed. I will follow up with Superintendent Stultz on this issue tomorrow." 2 things. I reached out to Scott Stultz, the superintendent of schools for school district number 2, and asked him for a comment. And wouldn't you know, crickets. It's always they're always pretty talkative when you're going to be discussing, a policy or a decision that they've made, or something that they think they can wiggle their way out of. Then they're all talkative, and if you don't ask them for a comment, then they crawl down your throat and demand that you talk to them. But when it's something that they know that they're absolutely in the wrong about, which I don't know that this is that case, but they're pretty silent. And in this case, Scott Stultz did not reply to my request for comment.
I don't like the teacher's comments. I'm offended by them, but he had, in my view, every right to say what he said.
All right, yeah, that's where I want to go, because he does have a right to say that. But that doesn't make him immune from any of the consequences.
Yes, exactly. So let me give you an example where I actually didn't have the right of free speech. While I was soldiering, I was not enamored with President Bill Clinton.
And you were wise back then. Wise beyond your years.
Yeah. So I made a bumper sticker and put on my truck that said, "And you thought Jimmy Carter sucked." and, and the sergeant major came out and he explained to me that you are not under the Constitution. You're under the Uniform Code of Military Justice. Yeah, the UCMJ. And I have no right to speak any negative of those
The commander in chief.
upline from me, I guess you would say, in the chain of command. And so I had to take it off. A soldier in the line of duty does not particularly enjoy the Bill of Rights, which is interesting because they're the ones that are on the front lines of defending them, but they don't get to enjoy them. In this case, though, is different. But I guess what I wanted to get to in this long diatribe is, where are the parents?
Good point.
That's what happens in so many of these cases. We shouldn't have to make some sort of a legislative gesture or come out as the Freedom Caucus and make a statement or any of those things. Parents should handle this.
In all fairness, Ken, I don't think that the parents have really had a chance to talk about this yet, because I was sent these screenshots Monday evening, late Monday evening. We had just got back from the People's Republic of Bozeman, and Christine and I were winding down for the evening, and my phone starts lighting up. And so, I mean, this thing has only been out yesterday. And if you'll notice, I didn't talk about it yesterday on the program because I was waiting for Scott Stultz to send me something, but he didn't. So let's first tackle the question of, is this free speech? Well, first, Mr. Hansen, whomever he is. And by the way, Mr. Hansen, you're welcome on the program anytime you like. Go ahead and give me a call. The phone number is 307-374-8989.
Yeah, we're not averse to offering the opposite side. And
No.
We'll prove that later.
Yeah. Well, it's maybe tomorrow we'll prove that. So nobody has taken away his freedom of speech. In fact, he's still in full possession of it. But that doesn't mean that he's immune from the effects of that. As I don't know how many times we brought this up in the last few programs, but Mr. Hansen, the teacher, he's in a position of authority. He works for the school district, and it's his employers. I guess his direct employer is the superintendent, but his boss is the school board. And guess who the boss of the school board is? That's you and me. I happen to live in Sheridan School District number 2. But this thing, ooh, man, this is bad. When you have a teacher, and let me just explain what the alternative school is. That's a school for students who have had some sort of difficulty at one of the other schools. Maybe there's a discipline problem, or they are not getting along with other students or something, or there's some sort of behavior thing going on. Not saying that's all the case, but it's students that there's a different environment that they need to be in. And so it's already kind of, vulnerable a little bit. They are. And so this guy, he's posting online that all of us that went to the Charlie Kirk Memorial are Nazis. That's not appropriate in any way, shape, or form.
Yeah, this school, or people that represent it, probably not the best place for heated rhetoric.
Mm-mm. Now, there's another part to this, because the Mike Swan, the principal, he says I've spoken with Mr. Hansen about taking it down, and he's agreed. And now if you go look for that post, you're not going to find it. So just deleting it, that solves the problem. No, it doesn't. And he kind of admits that. He says, I'll follow up with Stultz on this issue in the morning. But just deleting the post, that does not solve it. In fact, what that does is push that guy's opinion down underground where we can't see it. Right now, it's all out in the public for all to see, as it absolutely should be. That way we all know who this guy is.
Let me give you an analogy from my line of work, if I could. Let's say I'm working on somebody's bathroom. I pull the toilet, pull the flooring up, and I realize that...
Like our bathroom.
Yeah. I realize that the subfloor is in horrible shape.
Terrible.
I see all kinds of rot and corruption. I've got two choices. I can either go in and fix the rotten corruption, or I can put the flooring back down and ignore it.
I think that might be the cheaper way. Well, okay. Now, in the defense of Mr. Mike Swan, and I don't know him, I'm looking forward to having a conversation with him at some point. But in his defense, this was probably a knee-jerk reaction. And admittedly, in his email, he says, well, he's going to follow up with his, higher up. So at the very least, he doesn't ignore it. He just says, take the post down. Well, while I'm sure that helped not inflame parents, because I fully expect that after this episode hits, and by the way, I'm going to publish the beginning of today's program on the podcast. I'm fairly certain when this hits, you'll have a whole bunch of people that are pretty irritated about it. But I think, and I'm sure Mr. Hansen is not the only person that feels this way, but we should know, right? I mean, I think that and Ken, let me ask you this. Okay. You're the lovely Diane, your wife. She's in education, has been for a really long time. Should parents know the political inclinations of their teachers?
Ideally, I guess in my world, you'd never have a clue.
Okay.
That they would be kind of like Walter Cronkite and not really exposed.
Now, I think for the students, you might be right. Then, and the truth is, I think one of the hallmarks of being a good teacher is that your students never know your political leanings. They shouldn't.
You lead us to an interesting question, which actually came up in session, was if you're going to run for school board, should you declare what your party is?
I think so.
And I argued that you should. I think we need to understand the ideology, especially now where these are so polarized and so very different. I mean, they're very different ideologies of both of these primary parties.
Well, and there's another school board issue that's happening, and it's not unrelated, I don't think, but it's happening in Natrona County. And looky there, Ken, we've got Representative Jamie Lean on the phone. Yeah, I got a fish on the line here. Jamie, how you doing this morning, my friend?
Good morning. I'm doing well. How are you?
I'm doing pretty good. So can I call you Jailbird Jamie now?
That would be great.
I'm just kidding. So you've got some stuff happening down there in Natrona County too, don't you?
We do. I'm not sure where you want me to start and how in depth you want it to go, but I just wanted to make sure that your listeners know that bullying is not okay in any format. And when we have these doormat moments where we allow a distruth or a distruth to be spoken,
a lie,
that we're not helping ourselves.
Hey, Jamie, this is Ken. I think we need to back up just a second and introduce yourself, and then just kind of tell what happened last night, because people are going to, who's Jamie? So take it from there.
Yeah, Jamie. So why don't you take a minute or two and just tell my listeners who you are.
Thank you. I'm Jamie Lean, House District 38 representative out in Natrona County.
All right. Well, you were at a school board meeting, and maybe we should back up before you went to the meeting. Why don't you just tell everybody what's been happening down in Natrona County? Because I've seen a couple of news articles, and I frankly, I'm a little bit baffled by the whole situation. So why don't you just real quickly fill us in on what's going on, and then we'll talk about the school board meeting you went to.
In Natrona County, this school year, there is a custodian in an elementary school, and I had multiple parents reach out and ask if, one, we passed the state law for compelled speech, and two, if it was legal for the transgender to be around their students. And so the third week of school came, and that was the September 8th board meeting. And so I went to that school board meeting and just asked the school board if they're willfully neglecting state law when it comes to compelled speech that went into effect July 1 and private spaces for individuals that don't want to share a bathroom with a transgendering individual. I did not reference the clothing this individual has been wearing, even though that was a hot topic that parents were calling me about. And I did not reference if this individual should be employed, because those two things were not in line with state law. And so I just wanted to know, how is the district helping their employees when it comes to compelled speech? And September, so that was September 8th board meeting. And then there wasn't a news article for another week, given the tragic assassination of Charlie Kirk. And then that news article came out, and more parents called me with support and stories around the district and other schools that this is also happening in. And so I went to this school board meeting on Monday, September 22nd, and I did not give a public comment because I'm trying to allow the parents to work through this with the school board and the school district and just stay in my lane with accountability to state law. And at the end of this school board meeting, the chairman, Kevin Christofferson, took it upon himself to disparage my name and say that I didn't know what I was talking about and that I was ill-informed about the situation, that I had taken this just straight from social media. But little does he know, it was multiple parents, not just one, and not a social media post. I would like to believe that I am smart enough to know when somebody's being honest with me. And so I've had the opportunity to protect myself, knowing that I was no longer allowed public comment at the end of the meeting because we were to trustee comments only. And given his defaming remarks about myself, I stood up from the back of the room and went and stood in the public comment line.
Yeah.
And as soon as he was done talking, I walked to the chair and I took the microphone and said, "Mr. Chairman, my name is Jamie Lean, and I'm not a liar, and compelled speech is a state law." You know, during all of this, he has the two officers in the room approach me and take the microphone, and the one officer asked me to leave.
Wow.
From there, I just stood up and simply returned to the back of the room where I stood standing for the remainder of the meeting, which was maybe 2 or 3 minutes is all.
Now, Jamie, do you live in this school district?
I do live in this school district.
So, I'm just saying that maybe your property taxes pay for some of the things that happen in this school district, right? So why is it that you don't have a right to address the school board when, they're clearly addressing you?
Well, that's a great question. I know that during the way our school boards are run, public comment is at the very top of the hour as soon as they get started, after they have the Pledge of Allegiance and set the agenda. And then from there, the trustee comments come at the very end, and there's never a chance for parents to rebuttal anything that is said. This time, I'm unwilling to allow myself to be called a liar when I clearly know the state law, and I'm just asking for accountability from the school district on behalf of the parents and myself as a taxpayer.
Well, I seem to recall lots of debate on the House floor where you were arguing in favor of this bill. So, I mean, obviously you don't know what you're talking about.
Jamie, would you take a minute and describe that law?
Oh, compelled speech is the law, and it went into effect July 1. And it is that an individual that is choosing to go by a different pronoun or a different name than their legal name and their biological sex is an individual speaking to them is not required to call them by their preferred name or their preferred pronoun, that they have the legal right to just address them as Mr., Mrs., so-and-so, and that there is no repercussions to come from that.
Well, and the problem here, Jamie, that I see is, and admittedly, I haven't dug too far into, this particular situation, but from what I gather, you have a custodian that's choosing to dress as a woman, correct?
Yes, sir. And he's been at this elementary school for several years, and this is the first year he's come in and telling the kids that he is to be called a woman and has long hair and wearing floral prints into the school.
Yeah, so there's the problem. That's what I was driving at. So it's an elementary school, and I mean, little kids that age are extraordinarily impressionable, and so the school district, at least in just my view, is allowing these poor kids to be. They've got to be super, super, confused. Because, even a little kid can look at him and say, yeah, that's not a woman. So the school district is allowing these children to be, I mean, I don't know what better word to use than just confused. I mean, this is and I don't think that this is the only school that this has been happening in, but this situation, man, I just think it's wrong.
100%. Representative Tony Locke spoke on Monday night at this school board meeting, and he spoke about how this is grooming children to believe a certain ideological view, and I 100% agree with him.
Well, yeah, because you can go, even in elementary school, you can go to their science book or their, I'm pretty sure they don't have a science class in elementary school, but you can go to the bookshelf and grab the book that they use to teach the kids science. And I'm pretty sure it says that there's mommies and daddies and boys and girls. And yet you have a custodian wandering around that is, masquerading as a woman. I mean, it's just, and this is another case, Jamie, of, oh, well, this sort of thing doesn't happen in Wyoming. How many times have we heard that at the legislature?
Unfortunately, too many.
All right. So the question is, what happens next?
I would hope that the parents involved are willing to come to the school board and hold them accountable. I am happy to continue the path to protect the students. I know that the individual in question, it's not my job to determine if they can have a job. It is my job to make sure that the students are protected and that the district is following state law. And so that's my intention. If the parents are uncomfortable with the custodian in question, they're the ones that need to take it to the principal and to the school board and make it as loud and as clear as possible, all while being respectful, to make sure that their voice is heard and the students are protected. In the first Cowboy State Daily article that came out last week, there's a trustee, Dana Howie in Natrona County, and she said that in that article that they have made a plan to protect the custodian. And there was a question raised, who's there? Yeah, who's there to protect the students? After all, that is what our schools are for. They are for the students. And so I hope that people come forward and figure out what's going on, that they do have a backbone and that they do have the ability to make change when needed.
All right. Well, make sure you keep me updated on what's going on there. And if people want to reach out to you about this situation or others, how do they get a hold of you, Jamie?
My cell phone is a great option. It's 307-267-5675. Or you can email me at Jamie, JAYME .lean, LIEN @wyoleg.gov.
All right, Jamie. Well, thanks for calling in this morning. And like I say, make sure you keep us updated on what's going on. But good luck down there. And don't get any more tussles with the cops if you can avoid it.
Thank you for the advice.
All right. Have a good day, Jamie.
You too.
Well, that one's fascinating. Kind of goes with exactly the other thing we were talking about.
Yeah, I was just wondering if we could do a remote from the
Natrona County
Detention Center.
Live from the Natrona County Detention Center. I'm with just kidding, Jamie. I'm just joking. But, that's pretty bold, if you ask me, that a school board asks an elected representative, or it demands that they leave the microphone, and one of the cops in there says, well, you have to leave. I mean, we don't live in a police state, and Representative Lean, I mean, she's an elected representative. I think she has and she has, the right to vote on all of these measures, funding or otherwise.
And as she aptly pointed out, all she's trying to do is explain the compelled speech rule. If this custodian is insisting that the children call him ma'am or something else like that, that's in direct violation to the law. And that's obviously what Jamie was doing.
Yeah, and set aside, how impressionable young children are and what you're actually doing to them, trying to convince them of things that are not true, which is the exact opposite of what a school is supposed to be doing, that they're violating state law. And I would argue that just from what Representative Lean had to say, that the school board is violating state law as well. Well, I mean, both these situations, the one in Sheridan and the one down in Casper, and these are not the only two that I've heard of. But we're going to see this, and we got to handle this. And the only way to do that is for you to speak up, to contact your school boards, contact your superintendent. And I would say, light their phone up and make sure that they understand your position, because you're the one that pays the bills. Let's go ahead and take our first break. And when we come back, we're going to talk about some of the, I kind of touched on this yesterday, but some of the school shootings, left-wing violence. I've got a piece I got to tell you about. Back in a minute.
What everybody say? Nights gone away, rocks now down, nothing left today. No one gets today, we got to face the truth, nights far away. Tell me what you want, here's what you got. You've been every day more than we have ever seen. Rocks now down, don't ask why.
It's spring-ish in Wyoming. Well, what that means for the uninitiated is that it's going to be 70 degrees one day and then snow 1.5 feet the next. And really, if you don't like those two options, just wait a little bit. The weather will change. I know, it sounds a little stressful, but really you should put your mind at ease and buy a pair of socks from the Buffalo Wool Company. They'll keep you warm and dry even on the nastiest, coldest spring-ish day, and they'll keep you cool and dry even when it's 75 and sunny. To get you a pair, go to their website, thebuffalowoolco.com. Trust me, you're not going to be disappointed. Are you one of those guys that listen to the president just a little bit too closely, and now you're tired of winning? Are you getting the feeling that there's been way too many good things happening in our country and you just can't take it anymore? Well, if you are, and you think you should follow Rosie O'Donnell's example and get the heck out of Dodge, you need to call Rebecca Bextel at eXp Realty. She'll make those foreign country living ideas a reality for you. All you have to do is call 307-699-3519, and she'll make sure some freedom-loving, red-blooded American will now live in the home that you no longer want. If you want to sell your house, or if you want to buy one that's way better than the house you have right now, give Rebecca a call. Again, her phone number is 307-699-3519.
I've never felt the freedom like I do. I feel stronger every day, don't you? Well, I can show you how. A new day, a new way. Watch out, I'm only gonna get stronger. A new day, a new way. Watch out, I'm only gonna get stronger. A new day, a new way. Watch out, I'm only gonna get stronger. A new day, a new way. Watch out, I'm only gonna get stronger. I've never felt the freedom like I do. I feel stronger every day. I'm only gonna get stronger.
Cowboy State Politics is only going to get stronger. This program is only going to continue to expand. Cowboy State Politics Podcast, Cowboy State Politics Live, and the mobile app that's coming probably, hopefully, October 1st. It's going to be called the Open Range Record. I cannot wait to show it to you. But I realized quite a while ago that there's some people that just don't listen to podcasts. I don't know what's wrong with them, but they just don't. But they do read articles. And in Wyoming, we don't have first of all, we really don't have a media outside of this program that you can really trust or is at least honest with you. So I decided to create one. And I've written an app that I think is going to be pretty cool. It's going to be kind of like a new version of the Drudge Report, just not as left wing. But you're going to have all sorts of different articles from all different perspectives. And I've discovered something, and maybe this is something we should talk about, Ken, that it is really hard to find things that are just news reports. It's really hard. And I didn't, and being in this business for as long as I've been, I should have known this intuitively, but I don't know, maybe it slipped my mind or something, but it's really hard to find actual news reports that just, these are the facts, this is what it is, no opinion. I got lots of people that want to write opinion for the app, and I'm totally grateful for that. And the app does have an opinion section, but my intent was to say, All right, news on the news page, opinion on the opinion page. But I'm telling you, it's pretty difficult to find just straight news stories anymore, which is the problem that the mainstream media is having, that they don't report the facts. It used to be, I remember years ago, when I was doing college speech and debate, I did an event where it was extemporaneous speaking. So I'd amass these giant files of different news articles. And it used to be from pretty much almost every, news agency, so-called news agency, you'd have the article, right? Like, these are the facts of whatever they're talking about. And then at the end, there'd be a paragraph or two. Now, this is the author's opinion of what's going on. And you'd see that at the bottom, but the two were, separate. Now, admittedly, it is impossible to eliminate bias 100%. You can't do that. Human beings are inherently biased for our own belief systems, our own political inclinations. But we should make an attempt to try to, eliminate the bias as much as we can. Just say, hey, this is what happened. These are the facts. You make up your own mind, which is the intent of the Open Range Record.
I have a practice of printing out a news article as you do, and I'll sit down with a couple of highlighters and highlight where the opinion comes into it, especially just in the select use of a few words.
Yeah, and that's the inherent bias I was talking about. Yeah. And one of those that is not entirely accurate is we were sent a printout of an artificial, so-called AI, and you'll notice that the I is not very prominent in what I'm going to tell you about. A little AI description of our own Agent 29. Ken, when did you move to Casper?
I never will again. I'd rather live under a bridge than have to.
That's not true. It says your hometown is Casper, Wyoming.
I was born there, but if you ask me what my hometown is, it's definitely going to be Sheridan or Bighorn.
Yeah, and you spend a lot of your family's over across the mountain, but definitely your hometown is not Casper. But listen to this. From the AI bot, and I don't know which one he used, doesn't look like ChatGPT to me. But anyway, says Ken Pendergraft has served in the Wyoming House of Representatives since January of 2021.
No, 23.
23. Okay. All right. So he represents the interests of his constituents in House District 13-1.
No, I represent District 29.
That's not true.
Yeah.
This is AI says it's District 13.
Keep going.
All right, fine. You don't tell me what to do. Anyway, committee assignments. He's on the.
No, wait. There's another one.
Is there?
It says I represent House District 13. Where does it say that House District is? Natrona County.
Yeah, Natrona County. It's later on down.
Okay, well, I'm just doing from memory. You have it in front of you.
Well,
but
yeah.
no, that's actually in Laramie. House District 13 is in Laramie. That's Ken Chestic's district.
So I didn't know that you were pals with Ken Chestic. Maybe we should have a talk. I mean, you do have the same first name. I mean, maybe that's what. All right. So anyway, committee assignments. He's a member of significant committees in the House. You have been lazy, Agent 29, and let me explain why. According to this AI bot, you are on appropriations, which is correct. Definitely on appropriations.
Yeah.
And you're on judiciary. So you've really been slacking there.
No, never.
And you're on House Transportation.
I was in my first term.
Yeah, so but not anymore. Okay, so key legislation. This one is the funny one here. Ken Pendergraft has worked on various legislative initiatives, including supporting measures aimed at enhancing economic development. I didn't know you were one of these economic development picking winners and losers people.
That's a weird way of phrasing that I'm trying to defund the Wyoming Business Council.
Let's see here. Job creation in Wyoming. That's you. You've worked.
That's absolutely the job of the government, is to try to create jobs.
It is, yes, according to AI. Advocating for funding related to infrastructure improvements within his district. So you were involved in the flower pot over here? No, that wasn't an improvement.
No, but yeah, that was not an improvement. It's funny how many people have come to visit us from out of town, and they have to go right by that thing, and they say, "What is that?" But actually, there are a couple of things. There's a parking lot at the hub on Smith, and I went over and looked that over, and they need to get that fixed. It's dangerous the way that it is.
Lots of potholes.
Well, it's they put it in before anything around them, and it is, first of all, it's not flat. It creates a basin, and the basin is below every other property around it, so it creates a pond and an ice skating rink in the wintertime.
Oh, well, that's great, especially for all the people that go to the hub, which is it's basically the senior center of Sheridan.
Yeah, they're all expert ice skaters.
Yes, yes. Well, I have not been to the hub since I found out that the Sheridan Democrat Party has pretty much taken up residence there to write or to create all of their signs. So anyway, I'm glad that we got to get the AI version of who Ken Pendergraft is. Here, you can have this back. I don't know if you need a liner for your bird cage. But anyway, so don't pay attention to AI. It's going to lead you all over the place. All right, so from the Daily Wire. And this, I kind of talked about this. Oh, by the way, before I go there, if you want to be part of the show this morning, the phone number is 307-374-8989, 307-374-8989. We're going to leave the phone lines open for another, 20 or so minutes. So if there's something on your mind, go ahead and give me a call. So from the Daily Wire. A decade of left-wing violence, a look at 4 primary examples. Now, before I begin this, there was a shooting at an ICE detention facility in Dallas yesterday, or was it this morning? According to a Fox News report, some of the people that were killed are detainees, so we really don't know what's going on there. But the point I'm getting to, I think, and just to make you aware of that, but if you're going to shoot anybody, if you're going to open fire at anybody, if you're going to do that in the name of politics or whatever, you're not right in the head. I don't care who you are, what your political affiliation is. From the very beginning, you're a lunatic. And normal people, right thinking, level-headed people do not open fire on fellow citizens in the name of politics. I mean, that's just violence is not appropriate. Appropriate, that doesn't even cover it. That's understating the matter. It's just flat wrong. But most of this violence, I think we got to be honest about this. It's been coming from the left. And there's this piece in the Daily Wire. It starts out this way. America was shaken by the tragic assassination of Charlie Kirk, founder of Turning Point USA. Kirk is a devoted husband, father, and a man of faith who was remembered over the weekend by tens of thousands of supporters. By the way, if you didn't watch his memorial, you need to go watch it. I mean, that was it was one of the most moving things that I didn't get to watch it. I listened to it on the radio on the way to Bozeman, but tremendously moving. In the aftermath of his assassination, however, a national debate has erupted over the rising wave of left-wing violence in this country. Stepping in as a guest host of the Charlie Kirk Show, Vice President J.D. Vance addressed the issue head-on. Quote, "We have to talk about this incredibly destructive movement of left-wing extremism that has grown up over the last few years, and I believe is part of the reason why Charlie was killed by an assassin's bullet. Vice President Vance is right. Over the last decade, America has witnessed a disturbing surge in left-wing violence. In fact, a new Daily Wire exclusive report just revealed that the suspect in the attempted assassination of Justice Brett Kavanaugh now identifies as a transgender woman. He calls himself Sophie. Whatever. The violence is real and is now showing up in a myriad of locations. And I'm going to give you a couple of examples here. Now, you've heard the narrative on the left that, well, violence happens on both sides. Okay, so I suppose you are correct that there have been some right-wing nut jobs that have opened fire. But when the scale is like this, yes, I guess technically you can make that argument. But there's way, 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 way more on the American left. And the first example listed here is the congressional baseball game shooting. In June of 2017, a gunman opened fire during a practice of the annual congressional baseball game in Alexandria. That's the one where Steve Scalise was almost killed, and a couple of other people were shot. And James Hodgkinson, who was the shooter, he was a devout Bernie Sanders supporter. But again, off of his rocker. Okay, normal people don't do that. The next one, and this one was an entire summer of riots, and you can't tell me that those riots were started by people on the right. That just doesn't happen. I mean, the left riots, the people on the right pray. I mean, that is, if you want to look at the aftermath of the Charlie Kirk shooting, were there any riots? No. Were there any people like burning down police stations, which I guess is also kind of a right? No. Were there a bunch of people praying? Heck yeah. Millions.
How about smash and grab looting?
Yeah. Was there any smash and grab looting? Not that I'm aware of. From the Daily Wire piece, throughout 2020, left-wing riots spread across the United States, affecting over 2,000 cities. The unrest began in May of 2020 in Minneapolis, following the death of George Floyd, who we now know died from a drug overdose. And probably a whole bunch of other things. We put a cop in jail. His name is Derek Chauvin. At the conclusion of the violence, 19 people lost their lives, over $1 billion in damage, and 10,000 people were arrested. And then we had the attempted assassination of Donald Trump in Butler, Pennsylvania. On July 13th, Donald Trump, a former president of the U.S., or a president of the United States, and presumptive Republican nominee for the next election, survived an assassination attempt while speaking at a campaign rally near Butler, Pennsylvania. Yesterday, what's that guy's name? The other guy that tried to kill President Trump was convicted on all counts. Okay, now he didn't get a shot off. Thank God the Secret Service found him first. But there's yet another example. And if you can look through all his advocacy, and he's definitely on the other side. And then what about the 2019 Tacoma ICE Detention Center attack? In July of 2019, Wilhelm van Sporensen, a Dutch-born immigrant and left-wing activist, attempted to firebomb the ICE facility in Tacoma, Washington. He was shot and killed by police while attempting to ignite a propane tank. Van Sporensen had written a manifesto outlining why he attacked the ICE facility, and in the document he declared, quote, "It's time to take action against the forces of evil." Now, the rise of left-wing violence is alarming, though not surprising. Since President Trump's 2016 campaign, left-wing politicians, pundits, activists have consistently labeled right-leaning figures with extreme and inflammatory terms. All the Nazi, Hitler, fascist talk. Now, and if you are a disturbed individual, if you're somebody that's not right in the head, and you continually hear that rhetoric, well, he's a fascist, he's a dictator, he's a Nazi. What are you going to believe? Well, it's very likely, and we've got several pieces of evidence of this, that those folks take that literally. And some of them, and though we don't know, like the guy that tried to shoot Donald Trump, I mean, he was killed, and his body mysteriously, they disposed of it really, really fast. So we don't have any idea of what happened there, whether drugs are involved or anything. But I mean, it's you got to expect that sort of thing. And there's, and I want to talk. I've been meaning to talk about this too. I guess this is as good a time as any. But we do need to tone down the rhetoric. But it's not. This is not something that's happening on both sides. Now, I will admit that there are some folks on the right that I might be one of them that call the left radical communists, but I've got evidence to back it up. And just speaking the truth is not violence. But when you say that somebody is a Nazi, how worse could you possibly get? I mean, how much worse could it possibly get than you calling somebody a Nazi? Those were some pretty evil people. And you expect that nothing's going to happen after that? I mean, it's just absolutely absurd. So, yeah, we do need to tone down the rhetoric, but we, in the collective sense, and I mean you, the Democrats.
So, toning down the rhetoric and rhetoric itself, my kids used to like to call everything awesome. Oh, that's awesome.
Everything is awesome.
Yeah. If everything's awesome, how do you refer to God?
Yeah, indeed.
And what you do is desensitize to where it doesn't mean anything anymore. And the word Nazi has been tossed around so much, it really doesn't mean anything anymore. I've been to Dachau. I've stood by the ovens and looked in. I've seen the piles and piles of discarded shoes. I've walked through that place. It gives an entirely different vision. Certain words should be reserved for certain purposes. My mom used to say that about the F word. If you use it all the time, it loses its meaning. But that's what's happened to Nazi, and we become desensitized where it really doesn't mean anything. It doesn't trigger what it actually entails.
Yeah, and it's again, if somebody is off their rocker and they're not, they got mental problems or whatever. And I would argue that if you're one of these people that goes out and shoots somebody for political reasons, that you're Looney Tunes anyway, and you do have mental problems. But you're right, Ken. I mean, there are some words, like words have meaning. Words mean things, my friends. I hope this is the right one.
2 + 2 is 4, not 5 if you want it to be 5. And this is not to be discriminatory. This is to stand up for language. Words mean things.
Words do mean things. And you heard me yesterday. Words have power. And, when you call somebody a dictator and a Nazi, and do not think for a second that Sheridan is immune to this or that your local community is immune to this, because we're not. I mean, there are radical people that, that live in your own community.
Throw the word fascist in there too. That one is used so much nobody knows what it means anymore.
Yeah, exactly right. And I'm actually looking for the picture of the rally in Sheridan, but I don't seem to have it real handy. But anyway, I mean, it wasn't that long ago where there was a demonstration out. The Democrats put it on, the Sheridan County Democrats, and one of the signs said "No to Dictator Trump," and it had a swastika on it. Now tell me what would happen if you had a group of right-wing protesters. We've got better things to do, like actually go to work. But if you had a group of right-wing protesters that had Nazi signs, what would happen? Well, they would be in every newspaper across the great state of Wyoming. They would be splashed around on the front page, and it would be, Nazi rally held by GOP. But that didn't happen with the Sheridan County Democrats. In fact, the Sheridan County Democrats said, "Oh, we're doing Sheridan proud." I mean, that was the post, and I figured out where I can show that to you. Hold on just a second, just to prove what I'm saying. Here's the original post from the Sheridan County Democrats. Look at there. Dedicated folks did Sheridan proud. And then let's see here. Next one. Oh, there's the statement from the Democrat Party. Any form of violence is an abhorrent stain on our practice of democracy. America was and is built on the idea that we're free to express our positions, policies, and politics without fear of violence. We remain committed to building a country where every person can participate in our democracy. We don't have a democracy, guys. Free from violence. And then what is this guy? Tell me what this guy is. Okay, now, admittedly, this picture was taken before Charlie Kirk was assassinated, but it doesn't matter the timing. I mean, you're not immune just because you happen to do something before something else happened. I mean, that doesn't make any sense. But yeah, we do need to tone down the rhetoric. But show me, show me how all the evidence does not point to the left and to the Democrat Party. It absolutely does. Well, let's go ahead and take our second break, and when we come back, we'll continue with the program. Let me calm down and get some coffee. I do have my duct tape here. Maybe I need to use that. Oh, maybe later when we do the interview we're going to do. No, I don't want to jinx it. So, more when we come back.
Ever since gold backing was removed from the dollar, the value has dropped significantly over the past few decades. Experts say this is one of the main reasons goods are more expensive and your savings are worth less each year. How would you know how many dollars to save for retirement if the valuation of the dollar changes over time? Would you work all week for that $20 gold piece? Let's look at the valuation of this coin from the 1970s to today. When President Nixon took us off the gold standard in 1971, this coin traded for about $275. Today, it trades for about $14,000. Buying and holding rare coins using only a fraction of your portfolio is our suggested way to save for the future. Call U.S. Coin Capital at 1-800-878-2646 to get your free United States Gold and Silver Buyer's Guide.
Make sure that you subscribe and follow the Cowboy State Politics podcast. You can do that from the website, cowboystatepolitics.com, or anywhere that you get your podcasts. That way, you'll make sure that you won't miss a single episode of Cowboy State Politics. Welcome to Lessons in Civility by Morton Buildings. Gentlemen, is your garage completely jam-packed full of all of your unnecessary crap? And your lovely wife has been on your tail, nagging you nonstop to clean it out? It's not because she just wants to incessantly irritate you. Chivalry dictates that you should clear out a space so she can park her car inside and you don't end up sleeping on the couch anymore. To do that, contact Nick and Jesse at Morton Buildings. Their phone number is 307-674-2532. Not only are they the experts in metal building construction, they're also skilled at keeping you out of the doghouse. One more time. Their phone number is 307-674-2532, or you can check them out at their website, mortonbuildings.com. This has been Lessons in Civility from Morton Buildings. Welcome back to the program, Cowboy State Politics Live on a very busy Wednesday. Welcome back to the program, my friends. I'm your host, David Iverson, documented to be almost always right 99% of the time. A record that I wish the Wyoming media would attempt to surpass. Not that they could. I mean, it's just not going to happen. But I wish they'd give it the old college try. If you want to be part of the show, the phone number in the studio is 307-374-8989. 307-374-8989. Let's go ahead and talk to former Representative Jeanette Ward. Man, we are just getting inundated with representatives. How you doing, Jeanette?
I'm doing great. Thanks for taking my call.
Yeah, what's on your mind?
Well, I just wanted to talk about the NCSD school board meeting that happened on Monday night and the sorry, not sorry apology that was given by Trustee Dana Howie, who's a registered Republican in my district, by the way.
Oh. Now, did you get escorted out by the police, too, or at least told to shut up?
Nope. I gave my comments during the public comment time. I was not escorted out, and they didn't try to interrupt me, and I kept my comments to under 3 minutes. So
you followed the rules. Look at you.
Yes.
All right. Well, we talked to Representative Lean a little bit ago. Why don't you just give me your take on what happened?
So Trustee Dana Howie put on a Facebook post. Now, I don't know if you know the background, but there's a janitor in an elementary school who is currently requiring students to call him by female pronouns. And Trustee Howie responded in a Facebook post saying, God help this mother who complained about this if she runs into her. So the comments that I made were along the lines of, yeah, what kind of help will God need to provide this concerned mom when you run into her, Trustee Howie?
Yeah, exactly right. I mean, that sounds like a threat to me.
It does. So she tried to say that she's not a threat to anyone. She doesn't even kill bugs or mice. But she also said that she was looking to protect the custodian and not the parent. So she didn't say the not the parent part out loud.
What about the children?
But my question is, exactly.
What about protecting elementary school children?
Well, and that
So
is the
it's
most
shocking.
it's a disturbing part of this, Jeanette, that the school board is trying to protect the janitor who thinks he's a woman, and we're not talking about the impressionable, the school jam packed with impressionable little elementary school students. I mean, this is just so bizarre. And again, I mean, it's another example of how this craziness has made it all the way to our state. I mean, it just blows my mind.
And then shockingly, the board president, Christopherson, tried to get us to shut up by telling us to be like Charlie Kirk, right? So it's funny how rhinos are now appropriating Charlie Kirk. Well,
Yeah.
Charlie Kirk stood firm. He wasn't rude or disrespectful, but he stood firm. So it's right for us to call out this stuff. And I bristle when board president tries to get us to shut up by saying we need to be like Charlie Kirk. That's offensive.
Well, we could probably play her or him. We could play the school board hundreds of videos where Charlie Kirk says, a man cannot become a woman. I mean,
Right.
and I mean, isn't it the school's job to teach kids what the facts are instead of saying, "Hey, this guy over here, he's your janitor. You have to call him, Mrs. Out of her mind or whatever, out of his mind."
Yeah, that is the school's job. But if the school fails that, I have a different take than some other folks. Other people say we need to, withdraw from the school system. And that may be when it gets so bad that your children are in danger of imminent harm. Yeah, you do need to withdraw. But until that time, we need to stand and teach our children to stand respectfully. So you can teach, and I taught my kids this, even in elementary school. Respectfully, Mr. So-and-so, you are a man, and I will not call you a woman. You're not a woman, and I refuse to lie.
Not only do you refuse to lie, hi, Jeanette, this is Ken.
Hey there.
You're obeying the law. We passed the law which says these kids can't be compelled, and the school district is apparently crossing that line, and that's what Jamie was trying to point out.
Well, let's talk about that law. So that's SF 77. So as it is currently written, that law only protects employees of governmental entities. So it doesn't protect the general public. Now, that is something I'd like to see the legislature pick up in the next session, adding, making sure that law applies to everyone.
Well, and
particularly school children.
Well, I mean, it's already covered by, I don't know. I mean, it's that big thing that we always talk, the First Amendment, that,
Right.
you don't,
Of course.
But here's the thing, right? Like if you're being pressured by, your employer or the school or whatever, and they say, hey, you've got to refer to this person as the other gender. I mean, you're absolutely within your rights to say no. But again, when you've got people who are in positions of authority, namely the school board or the custodian, absolutely the custodian's in a position of authority. We can't allow them to do this to little kids. And I mean, I don't know how you fix it. But it's this morning, Jeanette, my mind has been blown by, we got this morning on the program. I don't know if you were listening, but we've got a teacher here calling all of us Nazis. So, I mean, this stuff is rampant, and I don't know how we fix it, except of course, to get rhinos out of office.
Yes. Rhinos and Democrats, which is what they really are.
Absolutely. Total redcoats. Well, Jeanette, thanks for calling in. Make sure you keep us updated on what's happening down there in Natrona County, and I'm sure we'll be talking to you here pretty quick. Oh, by the way, if folks want to get a hold of you, how do they do that? Or if you even want them to?
Absolutely. They can go to my website, jw4w.com. That's the letter J, the letter W, and FORW.com, or they can call me at 307-222-9747.
All right, Jeanette, I appreciate it. Have a good afternoon and keep us updated.
Will do. Thank you.
All right. Well, that was former Representative Jeanette Ward from Casper. She did represent the Chuck Gray's old district, a pretty conservative district. And Jeanette, I mean, she is the fireball is the word that comes to mind. But I can't wait until she runs again and retakes that district.
Yeah, she is a force to be reckoned with, that's for sure. And it was a gut punch when she lost that election. And I tell you, they threw everything at her. She was target number one.
Yes, and they started running ads like way before the election. I remember a giant banner on the Casper, the Pravda on the Platte website. I mean, and they were just vicious to her. But I think things are. Wasn't even expecting the Pravda on the Platte theme. Good call, Agent 29. All right. Well, I've been telling you about this interview that I've got. That we did with the author of the book, Deadwood, Gold, Guns, and Greed in the American West. I've had it for a while, and I've been meaning to play it for you. But, it's we had some other things come up last week and had to kind of preempt it. But we're going to go ahead and play that interview for you. It runs about 22 minutes. It's an interesting look into a town that, has a lot of Wyoming connections. And some of the characters in the book, they definitely have Wyoming connections. And so, and there's some things in there, and you'll hear it come out in the interview, that you probably didn't know about these. So let's go ahead and play the interview. And, we got it right here. No, I put it on yesterday's thing if you want to play it from there, but we can do it from here. Okay, no problem. I've got it. There again, pushing buttons for my producer. What are we going to do here? Let's see here. Where is it?
You could start paying me.
I could, but actually now I've got to go find it. Here we go. I got it. Here we go. Here's Peter Cousins from last week. A new book I've been working on is called Deadwood, Gold, Guns, the American West, and it's unlike a lot of different history books you read. It doesn't read like a history book. It reads more like a novel. And so I thought we should probably talk to the guy that wrote it. His name is Peter Cousins, and he joins me on the program. Peter, how are you doing today? Welcome to the program.
I'm doing well. Thank you, David. Thank you for having me.
Well, first question everybody gets on my show is why don't you just take a minute or two and tell my audience about yourself?
Okay. I'm a retired Foreign Service officer, spent 30 years with the State Department. Before that, I was an Army officer for 4 years. And since I retired, I've been writing full time.
All right, great. So have you always been interested in Deadwood, or is this just kind of a new thing, new project that you decided to start? Tell me about how the book got started.
It was a new project. When I finished my my third book on the Indian Wars, A Brutal Reckoning is the title of it. It was part of a trilogy that covered the Indian Wars throughout the entire United States, from the Appalachians to California. Once I finished that, I had a hankering to go back west, but I'd done enough war books for a while. I wanted to try something different. And a good friend of mine, Tom Clavin, had written successful books on Tombstone and Dodge City. So of the three iconic towns in the West, those two were out. That left Deadwood, which to me has always been the most fascinating anyway. And it was a combination of that plus a fascination with Deadwood that I had arising from the HBO series. I have to confess that was a big inspiration too. And I wanted to examine for myself just how accurate that series was.
What'd you find out?
I found out that in the main, it did a real good job, especially with the atmospherics. It captured well the filth and the claustrophobia of living in this tight, narrow gulch. They captured all that very well. For the most part, they did a good job on the characters. They took enough liberties to make really the real life characters, as I portray them, I think even more fascinating than the characters in the series. But in the main, they did a good job.
I've got one more question before we get into the book. You've actually got a Wyoming connection. As I understand it, you're on the board of the Buffalo Bill Center. Isn't that right?
That's right. The Board of Advisors.
Excellent. All right. So a couple of the pieces that I found to be the most interesting was I think that you portrayed Wild Bill Hickok more in a more realistic fashion than I think I've ever seen him before. I mean, like before reading your book, he was always the stereotypic Western gunfighter type. And reading your book, I mean, he seems like a normal person. And there were some things that I didn't know about him, like that he really wasn't able to see all that well by the time he got to Deadwood. Why don't you tell me what you found out about Wild Bill in your research?
Well, I was surprised to discover that earlier on in his career, when he was a sheriff or a marshal in Kansas, and which is where he became famous for gunning bad guys down, and his type of law enforcement, his type of justice wasn't really appreciated by Kansans. Generally, they preferred sheriffs who enforce the law without violence, and eventually he just went too far and didn't win election to his last job as a sheriff, and people in Kansas were pretty glad to see him go. From reading papers from Kansas, I was struck by that they thought it was no great loss to the state to see Wild Bill Hickok leave. I was surprised too that as he was preparing to go to the Black Hills, just how much he as a legend, he was on the skids, just how much how many steps he dropped. And by the time he decided, to go to the Black Hills and try to make, one last go of it there, as you mentioned, his eyesight was failing him. And that, of course, is something a gunfighter can't do without.
Yeah, that's kind of bad.
Yeah. And he was only 38 years old. Despite the failing eyesight, he may have had VD, that's not for certain, but he was taking a lot of quack medicines that gave people the impression that his skin was waxy, he looked sickly. He wasn't the same Wild Bill, excuse me.
Well, yeah, and one interesting exchange in the book, you mentioned that every morning he got up and he started his morning with a shot of whiskey and target practice.
Right.
I've never got up in the morning and thought, hey, let's go outside and shoot some guns. I mean, later on maybe, but not first thing in the morning.
Right.
All right. Well, another of the characters that's, definitely around Sheridan, and I think that she was probably pretty influential in starting the city of Sheridan, is Calamity Jane. And there's some really interesting stuff about her. But why don't you tell me about one of your favorite pieces that you learned about Calamity Jane?
I think the way her legend was created and the fact that she achieved a legendary status while she was still in Deadwood. By 1878, she was already a national celebrity, and she was only 22 years old. And most people in Deadwood considered her to be just a common soiled dove, and an alcoholic one on top of that. But she managed to, through self-aggrandizing stories, she managed to get the ear of a couple of journalists and the author of a book on the Black Hills, a fellow who was in the Black Hills in 1877 doing research for a book to boost the Black Hills. Somehow she got his attention, and when the book came out, it featured a Calamity Jane that was recognizable to no one. There was a big picture of her on horseback with a 6-gun in either hand. She was touted as being an Indian scout, having served with the Army on the field, and being a trick rider and an expert herder and this and that. And that image caught on. It was picked up by a dime novelist who started a series called Deadwood Dick, which itself did a lot for Deadwood, for the myth of Deadwood. And he made Calamity Jane, the fictionalized Calamity Jane, a heroine in his dime novels. So here she was in 1877, 1878, still working as a soiled dove and drinking herself into stupors in Deadwood. And she was already a national celebrity. And newspapers in Deadwood were absolutely mystified. They didn't understand how any of this came to be. They appreciated the fact that when there was a smallpox epidemic back in 1876, that she had stepped forward to tend the sick. That was very much to her credit. But beyond that, they just couldn't understand all the hoopla about her.
Well, and I think that, I think where the chapter starts and you kind of start talking about Calamity Jane, they're in Cheyenne, and I had to laugh out loud that apparently that she had been thrown in jail and didn't have any clothes to go on the journey, and so they went and found a whole bunch of soldiers' clothes and then took her to Deadwood. I found that to be like really fascinating. Now, one thing I wanted to ask you about was it just by coincidence that all of these different folks ended up in Cheyenne and they decided just to hook up together and go to Deadwood, or did some of them have plans, or was it all by happenstance?
I think, Wild Bill certainly had plans. Charlie Utter, his buddy, certainly had plans. And Cheyenne was the principal jumping off point to the Black Hills. So it's logical that they would meet there. Hickok didn't necessarily have plans to go with Charlie Utter and Utter's caravan. Hickok himself, he was trying to capitalize, on his celebrity by starting up a caravan of his own, advertising it, and he got no takers, or at least too few to make it worthwhile. And he ended up throwing in with Charlie Utter and his caravan. Calamity Jane just happened to be working in what was called a hog ranch, a brothel outside of Fort Laramie, which was near Cheyenne. And again, that was pure happenstance. The post commander asked Charlie Utter and Wild Bill if they wouldn't mind taking on one more prostitute. She'd been causing trouble on post. As you said, she was in the guardhouse after a long drunk with the soldiers and barely clad. And they agreed to take her because she worked out some kind of a deal with Charlie Utter's brother to, quote, lay up, unquote, with him on the journey to the Black Hills. So off she went with Wild Bill and the Utter brothers.
Yeah, and again, that whole part of your book was kind of humorous to me because they show up in Deadwood, and she kind of goes off from the group for a little bit, and then comes back and says, "Hey, business wasn't so good. I need to borrow some money." And it every time that I have heard about Calamity Jane in the past, I have not thought of her as an attractive woman. You paint a very different picture of her in the book when she actually put some effort into it and dolled herself up.
Yeah, that's what people in Deadwood said. I mean, again, I relied a lot on the newspapers of the period in Deadwood, and newspapers would talk about Calamity Jane quite frequently and comment on her appearance, comment on her behavior. That plus the recollections of early Deadwood pioneers who knew her, and the majority said that when she was dressed like a woman and made up, that she didn't look half bad. I mean, she was very tall. She was 5'8" at least. She a brunette, dark complexion, big busted. And again, she was only 20 years old when she got to the Black Hills. And most pictures we see of Calamity Jane were taken later in her life after, the ravages of alcohol had played havoc with her.
Well, and pretty much everywhere you go in Deadwood, I mean, there's pictures of her and Wild Bill everywhere. But every single one of them that I saw anyway, of Calamity Jane, she's in the buckskin clothes and she's got at least a couple of pistols on. And, I was reading that passage out of your book and I'm like, whoa, this is a very different characterization of that I ever heard of her.
Yeah, that came a little later on after she already was a celebrity, and these photographs were taken to play up on that image. And you mentioned seeing photographs of Calamity Jane and Wild Bill. You would never see a photograph of them together. It's part of the myth that they were at a minimum close friends and perhaps lovers. Some have even speculated that Calamity Jane had a baby by Wild Bill. The truth of the matter is Wild Bill Hickok had no use for Calamity Jane at all. And even if he had, they only knew one another for just under about 3 weeks from when she was picked up by the Utter caravan until Hickok was gunned down in Deadwood. They only knew each other about 3 weeks. And again, Hickok wanted nothing to do with her. So that's a real myth.
Well, and there are a lot of myths surrounding Deadwood, and one of them being, I think, that once Jack McCall shot Wild Bill, that there was a trial, and which there was, according to your book, But one thing you point out is that it really wasn't. It wasn't a fair trial. It wasn't a legal trial. That it was kind of a show trial.
It was a so-called minors' court because Deadwood, at the time, Deadwood was unique in the West. Of all towns in the West, Deadwood being constructed on land that belonged to the Lakota Indians by treaty in perpetuity. Because this town was built illegally on Lakota land, it was not subject to any federal or territorial or state laws. So essentially, when Wild Bill was killed, there was no law in Deadwood. There were no courts, there were no judges. There were plenty of unemployed lawyers, but that was about it. And so when McCall killed Hickok, a bunch of folks in Deadwood got together real quickly, selected a jury, and picked a former judge from Wyoming to be the judge for this case, and got a couple attorneys to represent the prosecution and defense. And it was a mockery of justice. There was no doubt that McCall walked into the number 10 saloon, shot Wild Bill in the back of the head without provocation. But McCall, in his defense, claimed that Wild Bill had killed his brother,
right, and
also made threats to kill Jack McCall. And so the jury bought that, and they acquitted McCall, much to the horrified amazement of the judge in the case and the better members of town. And McCall made one big mistake after that. He left Deadwood. The prosecuting attorney kind of tailed him, and McCall started boasting about how he had pulled one over on the people in Deadwood because, one, he had no brother, and two, Hickok never had threatened him. So it leaves the question, why did McCall kill Hickok? And I came to the conclusion that he, after looking at all the available facts, that he was just layabout, ne'er-do-well, maybe not altogether right in the head, who just wanted some notoriety.
See, in the legend that you hear is it was some sort of gambling debt, or he lost at cards to Wild Bill. So none of that is true?
Well, he lost the cards to Wild Bill the night before, but Hickok just kind of brushed it off and said, "Look, next time you play cards with me, you better have enough to cover your losses." And in fact, he tossed $1 to McCall and said, here's breakfast money for you. So maybe McCall felt insulted by that, but it certainly wasn't provocation enough to shoot a man.
Walk in and shoot him. Now, the last question I have for you, as you know, this is a show about politics, and so I figured we should probably talk about some of the politics surrounding Deadwood. But I loved the section of your book that where you discuss how the political system in Deadwood was set up, and I was hoping you could tell my listeners how that all came to be.
Well, initially, as I said, Deadwood was an illegal town, and so there were no provisions made for, like I say, federal or territorial laws to be enforced in Deadwood, although a tax collector did appear in Deadwood in 1876. The townspeople got together and they created their own sort of ad hoc government they elected a mayor, they elected a sheriff, and they established a council of, if I recall correctly, 6 members. And these people had no legal standing anywhere. The only legal standing they had was what the people in town were willing to accord to them. But there was enough of a desire on the part of people in Deadwood. I mean, despite all the gunplay and which is exaggerated, but was prevalent enough to make for a good story in my book. Despite all that, the majority of people in Deadwood wanted law and order. They wanted to be able to know that the gold they mined, they were going to be able to keep it safely, and that businessmen who invested in Deadwood would be safe and secure in their businesses. And so that's essentially how government started. And the first mayor, a fellow named E.B. Farnham, he served as mayor, justice of the peace, you name it. And with his election, the crime rate actually dropped. These petty crime dropped. Gambling and prostitution was never going to go away.
Right.
Deadwood accepted that as part of life in Deadwood, and that's part of what made it so intoxicating to so many outsiders. And once Deadwood and the Black Hills became part of the Wyoming Territory, once the Lakotas were stripped of the Black Hills by the U.S. government in 1877, then Deadwood fell under Wyoming territorial laws. But interestingly, during the time in which I write, during the 3-year period that was a heyday of the wild Deadwood, Deadwood we all imagine.
Right.
There was no town government. The city of Deadwood didn't want to incorporate. They didn't want to go beyond just county services and paying county taxes. And so it was an unincorporated town, and it was ruled by county officials. Predominantly Democrat, too. It was predominantly Democratic town. Of course, Democrats and Republicans that meant very different things than today.
Sure. And the piece that I'm driving at is that there were a number of appointments, and most all of those appointments were Republicans.
Right. When Deadwood first became part of the Wyoming Territory, the governor of Dakota Territory. I'm sorry, I should say Dakota Territory. I don't know why I said Wyoming Territory.
Wyoming wants everything anyway, so yeah. I'm good with that.
I'm thinking Wyoming right now. I'm going there next week. When it became part of Dakota Territory, the governor, who was Republican, appointed a sheriff, a justice, and county commissioners, and he appointed all Republicans. And with the exception of the sheriff, Seth Bullock, who I'll talk about more in a second, they were all people from the state capital of Yankton. So it really felt like carpetbag rule to the people of Deadwood. And Seth Bullock, who was one of the real stand-up guys in Deadwood, a really fine lawman and a fine businessman and proponent of law and order. He unfortunately came back to Deadwood after his appointment and was tainted as a carpetbagger, and just made it through half a term before the Democrats were able to get a call for early special elections, and everything flipped.
And they just removed them all, huh?
They removed them all. Yeah, they didn't want any part of carpetbag rule.
All right. So you mentioned that you're going to be in Cody here pretty soon. I understand that you're going to be giving a presentation. If some of my viewers want to go see you, how can they do that?
I'll be at the Buffalo Bill Center of the American West. That'll be a week from, it'll be next Wednesday. And I'll be appearing with Paul Hutton, a very well-known historian who wrote a wonderful history of the West, just came out last month, called The Undiscovered Country. And he and I will be speaking together. And it's going to be recorded, I understand, for Wyoming PBS. But okay. If you want to see us live, it'll be at 3 o'clock next Wednesday in Cody at the Buffalo Bill Center in the auditorium there.
Excellent. And if anybody wants to get your book, how do they get a hold of one of these?
Oh, in their local bookstores or Amazon. I guess Amazon's the go-to place these days.
All right. The book is Deadwood, Gold, Guns, and Greed in the American West. And I've been speaking with its author, Peter Cozzens. Peter, thank you for joining Cowboy State Politics. I really appreciate it, man. And good luck with the book.
Thank you, David. You take care.
Yep. Have a good afternoon.
Okay.
So there's the interview with Peter Cozzens, who is the author of Deadwood, Gold, Guns, and Greed in the American West. It's a good read. It's I enjoyed going through it. And like I say, you're probably going to learn some things that you didn't know before. Apologies that we didn't get this interview in last week, but as I keep saying, we had some other things to talk about. Now, we're going to go to a break in just a second, but they're talking about right now on Fox News about the shooting down in Dallas. Let's go ahead and dip in there and see what they're talking about.
Reach out to 1-800-CALL-FBI. Thank you. Senator Cruz. Thank you.
This needs to stop. Violence is wrong. Politically motivated violence is wrong. It was 2 weeks ago today that we saw a political assassination in Utah that tore the heart out of much of this country. This is the third shooting in Texas directed at ICE or CBP. This must stop. To every politician who is using rhetoric demonizing ICE and demonizing CBP, stop. To every politician demanding that ICE agents be doxxed and calling for people to go after their families, stop. This has very real consequences. Look, in America, we disagree. That's fine. That's the democratic process. But your political opponents are not Nazis. We need to learn to work together without demonizing each other, without attacking each other. And I want to say thank you. I want to say thank you to the brave men and women of law enforcement. I want to say thank you to the brave men and women of ICE and CBP.
That was Ted Cruz talking about this, and he's right. You know, we got to stop this stuff, and that's what I was referring to earlier on the show, that, you know, calling your opponent a Nazi first, I mean, it's not a good way to start a conversation, but true, it's not true. And, you know, a lot of the violence that we're seeing in our country right now, well, it is predominantly coming from one side of the aisle. And I don't think that any honest person can really deny that. Well, let's go ahead and take a break. And when we come back, Hillary Clinton, she's back in the news. She would never, ever, ever cancel a comedian. Ever, 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 ever. More in a minute. Are you tired of all the meaningless political drivel floating around right now? Endless commentary that really doesn't have anything backing it up? Do you long for the days of true investigative journalism coming from an authoritative source who really doesn't care how popular and apparently good-looking a politician is? Fortunately for you, that's what I do on Cowboy State Politics. New episodes are published every Monday, Wednesday, and Saturday, and you can get them anywhere that you get your podcasts. iHeartRadio, iTunes, TuneIn, really any of them will work. But the easiest way is just to go to the website, cowboystatepolitics.com. There, you can find all of the shows, as well as any of the articles I might bring up during the course of the program. Cowboy State Politics Live, the program you're listening to right now, is broadcast every Tuesday through Friday, beginning at 8 a.m. Pay attention to all of that other block-headed nonsense if you want. Just make sure that you don't miss an episode of Cowboy State Politics. And now, back to our program. Welcome back to the program, Cowboy State Politics Live. I'm David Iverson, your conservative voice. Welcome back to the program, my friends. Thank you for watching and thank you for listening. Little heads up on what's going to be happening later on this week. We will not be having a program on Friday. The lovely Christine and I have to run out of town. I told you it was going to be yesterday. I mentioned we're going to have to play this by ear a little bit. But got an important thing I got to do in Cheyenne, and so we won't have a program on Friday. We will, however, have I will have a podcast episode for you. And, yeah, as usual, the show must go on. And that's kind of what makes this program so, as prevalent as it is. We're not one of those folks that does a program every other week or whenever we feel like it. We do it because we tell you.
Rub it in, buddy.
Yeah, whatever, man. I'm not the one that goes and gallivants around, and I don't know what it is that you do when you're not here. I mean, it's the whole representing the people business. I mean, how dare you?
Well, next week I'll be doging and gallivanting at the University of Wyoming.
Well, yeah, and maybe that's a good place to start. Maybe the hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of millions of dollars we dump in there. But according to Gabe Saint, things are looking up at the university. So, I mean, all right, maybe they're doing better. Someone who is not doing better, Oh.
I just wanted to throw this out there. I don't know whether you want to mention it or not, but we have tentatively booked none other than President Seidel to come in studio and be on our show.
Yeah, I'm good work there, Agent 29, Mr. Producer. Good job. I'm fascinated. I think that it's going to be fascinating to talk to him because it's going to be a very different conversation than the last time I talked with him. But according to Gabe, there's been a lot of good things that have happened at the university that maybe you're not aware of. Now, that interview is, again, it's tentative and it's quite a ways in the future, next, November sometime. So anyway, something to look forward to. Conservative influencer targeted by Biden administration blasts Hillary Clinton as she defends Jimmy Kimmel. Now, if you're, we've talked about this on the program before, but apparently it is not all this cancel culture that is that took Jimmy Kimmel off the air. Oh, I mean, that was the straw that broke the camel's back. But it turns out it's the always broadcasting communism affiliates that have decided that they're not going to broadcast Jimmy Kimmel. Disney, on the other hand, decided they were going to put him back on the air. And a lot of that is from pressure. That's what it is. You know, the Disney executives or whatever, they couldn't handle everybody screaming about free speech when nobody took Jimmy Kimmel's right to free speech away. He still has it. You just don't have a right to a television show working for a private company. But anyway, Hillary Clinton has decided to wade in on this whole thing. Former Secretary of State Hillary Clinton attempted to run defense for embattled late-night comedian Jimmy Kimmel, but newly vindicated meme maker Douglas Mackey got the last laugh. Clinton took to X to voice her opinion, claiming that she would never attempt to silence a comedian who said something she didn't like or found it to be offensive. She also linked to a longer conversation she had on the topic with Columbia University Dean Karen Yarhimilo for The New Yorker. Quote, Jimmy Kimmel and other late-night comedians have certainly said things about me that I find offensive and even outrageous, Clinton said. It never crossed my mind to call up the networks and say, get rid of this guy, because that's not how America works. Well, she's right about that. That's not how America works, but it is how Hillary Clinton works. So Douglas Mackey, he's the guy that made the meme to tell people to vote on a different day. And he was prosecuted for it, and he spent time in prison for it. Here's what he posted. Madam Secretary, it crossed your mind to call up Senator Klobuchar, the FBI, and the DOJ and have me arrested for a humorous meme about your campaign. You then celebrated my unlawful and wrongful conviction, which was later overturned by a federal appeals court. Sit down. Rightfully so. Hillary Clinton, definitely, she was one of the people that was screaming about censoring the press and censoring, anybody who spoke up about her.
Sit down. I was kind of thinking about how you tell a dog, get down. Get down.
Get down. Sit down.
And then came the memory of Hillary barking. It just all fit in my mind.
Yeah, well, Hillary Clinton, she's, has no sense of self-awareness at all. And that's mainly the problem with a lot of these national Democrats is nothing. They don't really care about what they've said in the past. Now, they do if it comes up to bite them in the rear end. But for them, whatever argument works at the moment. Now, here's a funny one for you. And we haven't talked about Kamala Harris, for a long time, and that's kind of been on purpose. But she's out hawking her new book. From the Washington Free Beacon. Kamala ruled out Mark Kelly for VP to avoid attacks on his military record. Then she picked Tim Walz, who misrepresented his military record. And I quote, Kamala Harris ruled out Arizona Senator Mark Kelly as her running mate because she was worried about attacks on his military record, she reveals in her new book. Instead, she went with Minnesota Governor Tim Walz, who soon came under fire for misrepresenting his military record. Harris thought Kelly was magnetic, but fretted that he had not yet had an oh crap moment, it says the other word in the piece, during his political career. Politico reported that based on an excerpt from the former vice president's forthcoming memoir, 107 Days, she worried his military service could be used against him a la the Swift boat attacks against John Kerry. The term refers to the 2004 Swift Vote Veterans for Truth campaign, which cast doubt on then Democratic nominee Kerry's Vietnam War record and helped derail his White House bid. That effort was led by GOP strategist Chris LaCivita, who served as Donald Trump's senior advisor on his presidential campaign last year. Quote, I realized I couldn't afford to test Mark Kelly in that ugly grinder. Instead, she picked Tim Walz. And I've got a little piece of video for you here. Let me just pull it up here. There it is. Yeah, so not having, and this is one of the things, like what happens during show prep. Things are moving so quickly in the studio that sometimes I forget to get the sound bites to my lovely producer. Not lovely, awesome producer. Lovely is the word never mind. Here's Tim Walz.
Hope woke up like many of you did 5 weeks ago and said, Dad, you're the only person I know who's in elected office. You need to stop what's happening with this. I'll take my kick in the butt for the NRA. I spent 25 years in the Army and I hunt. And I gave the money back, and I'll tell you what I have been doing. I've been voting for common sense legislation that protects the Second Amendment, but we can do background checks. We can do CDC research. We can make sure we don't have reciprocal carry among states, and we can make sure that those weapons of war that I carried in war is the only place where those weapons are at.
The problem is that Tim Walz didn't ever carry one of those so-called weapons of war, which, by the way, they're not weapons of war anyway. That's an AR-15 that he's talking about from the piece. Walz repeatedly claimed to be a command sergeant major, but actually retired at a lower rank. The Minnesota governor also claimed to have carried weapons of war. You just heard him saying that, although he never saw any combat. And he retired from the National Guard as higher-ups were considering deploying his battalion to Iraq. Then Republican vice presidential nominee J.D. Vance, a fellow veteran on the campaign, somebody who actually did serve in combat, repeatedly said Walz's military misrepresentations amounted to stolen valor. Walz's misrepresentation of his military service reaches back all the way as far as 2006, when his congressional campaign's media kit falsely claimed that he served in Afghanistan. That was reported by the Washington Free Beacon. So Harris, worried about Mark Kelly, who, I disagree with just about everything that Mark Kelly says, and I think he's a radical Democratic communist. At least he did serve in the military, and he was an astronaut. So at least he does have some credentials. And I guess maybe Tim Walz has credentials, but he never served overseas.
So that Tim Walz thing, that's interesting to me, because technically he would have been issued some sort of weapon as an officer. Many of them are just issued a 1911 sidearm, depending on when you were in, but that's probably the most likely one. So maybe that's a weapon of war. It's also possible that for certain training exercises, something he may have carried an M16, but certainly never had the opportunity to carry one into combat.
Well, and that's what he meant, taking it in context. That I carry during war, and however he put it, he didn't carry an M16. Maybe he did for drills, but that's about it. But he was never deployed, and I mean, it's just like all the Democrats. They don't really care about the truth. Most of them don't. And the only time they do is when it bites them in the rear end. Now, so if you're wondering, it's easy to hammer on Democrats for being as radical as they are, but they're in real trouble nationwide. And it's a lot of it. You can go all the way back to the election. Donald Trump won a decisive victory in the last election. And the Democrats seem to be moving farther and farther and farther to the left, and even so much that it doesn't even make a lot of sense. Well, on CNN, and if CNN is reporting this, it's bad. But they just reported. Let's see here. Here we go. Yeah. In the stack of stuff. Now CNN has their polling guru. His name is Harry Enton. He warned Democrats on Monday that they're in definite real trouble with American voters ahead of the 2026 midterms. Now, again, if this is CNN reporting this, it's probably worse than Harry Enton is laying it on. But here's that piece from CNN. Check this out. This is pretty crazy.
Americans, though, still trust Republicans over Democrats and handling some merry issues, some major issues, rather. CNN's Harry Enton. Married depends on your perspective, I guess.
I am not married.
I said Mary as in happy. Anyway, let's talk about this. What do you think?
Yeah, what are we seeing? You know, Donald Trump being underwater, Democrats saying, oh, this guarantees us we're going to fly high in the midterms. Let me tell you, this guarantees you nothing, because at this particular point, the Democrats are the New Orleans Saints of political parties. What are we talking about? Trust the Dems or GOP more on the economy? Who leads on the economy? Republicans by 7. Immigration, Republicans by 13. How about crime? A big issue for Donald Trump and the Republicans. Look at that. Lead by 22 points. So the bottom line is this. At this particular point, the ball may be on the ground, but the Democrats have not picked up the ball and running with it. If anything, at this particular point, it's the Republicans who are running with the ball on the top issues, the economy, immigration, and crime.
Give some context on this. Compare this when Republicans last took the House.
Yeah, let's compare it back to 2022. I think this kind of gives away the game right here. Okay, the GOP is more trusted than the Dems on the economy. It was 12 points in 2022. Slight decline in that lead, but still 7 points. How about immigration? It was Republicans by 3 back in 2022. Look at this. The Republican lead's actually gone up by 10 points. What are you doing, Democrats? My goodness gracious. And on crime, the Republicans were up by 13, and now they're up by 22. The lead again expanding by nearly double digits. So whatever Democrats are doing, it ain't working, Kate. It ain't working. Republicans have the lead on all 3 issues.
What's the reason that you are finding so far that's driving this?
Yeah, I mean, look, it's all about the center of the electorate, right? You win with independents, you win overall. And what do we see right here among independents? Republicans still have a point lead on the economy. They got a 10-point lead on immigration. They got a 21-point lead on crime. The bottom line is when you look at these numbers, Democrats should call their offices because at this particular point, even if Republicans...
Hold on. Go to the Fox News real quick.
Miles from Prairie Land, Texas, where just 2 months ago an individual ambushed
So what it
a separate
says
ICE facility
is
targeting
the
their
rounds
officers.
found near
It
the
has
shooter's
to
body
end,
had
and the FBI
anti-ICE
and our
messages
partners
written on
will
them.
lead these
We'll listen for a
investigations
little bit.
and these investigative efforts to see to it that those who are targeting our law enforcement are pursued and brought to the fullest extent of justice. That from the FBI Director Kash Patel. And of course, that photo that you see at the top is what he has in his post
so what it's
on
showing
X.
you is
all of this now
it looks
pointing
like
to something that Paul Murrow was just talking about.
like a magazine,
So
like
my question now,
a
Paul,
quick
is
load
this
magazine,
domestic
and there's
terrorism?
5 shells on it. You can see that there's writing on them.
We can call it domestic
I can't see
terrorism,
what it
but we
says,
should recognize as a
but
federal case, there's no way to charge
there's
it
definitely
really as
messages on them, and they're saying that it's anti-ICE messages on the rounds.
That's actually a clip, a stripper clip.
Yeah, that's
Yeah.
what I was. Yeah, that's what the
charges on terror.
word I was going for.
Angle here for a murder charge because it was a federal facility, but the perp is dead. So realistically, it's academic.
there you go.
What we're
Okay,
going to do?
all right. Well, that's enough. That's just I saw that on the screen. I was like, holy crap! That's exactly what we were referring to earlier. So again, more left-wing bull crap, shootings, killings. Again, we gotta find a time, find a place where we can actually sit down and have a conversation, which is what we're going to attempt to do later on this afternoon. And again, I would love to tease this out for you. I'm actually pretty excited about the interview we're going to record later. But, a lot of times, man, I start teasing stuff out and I jinx myself, and I don't want to do that. I think this is going to be a pretty cool conversation. So, unfortunately, I got to keep you in the dark a little bit. And I want to end on, we got about 11 or 12 minutes, and I want to end on this. This is a piece from the Federalist that I found this morning. I think it's really important, okay? But it's entitled, Charlie Kirk's Martyrdom is Bringing People to Christ, and the Church Should Be Ready. And I quote, let me just read you, let's see here. Okay, here's the second paragraph. Christian apologist Frank Turek, who mentored Kirk and attended the event at Utah Valley University where Kirk was killed, highlighted the reason for hope, saying that the reason Kirk is in heaven is, quote, not because he sacrificed himself for his Savior, but because his Savior sacrificed himself for Charlie Kirk, and for everyone, by the way. It's not just Charlie Kirk. Prior to the memorial services, churches across the U.S. and even internationally seemed to experience a surge in attendance. Social media platforms were inundated with posts and comments from people saying they had never or not in many years attended church, but planned to, and they had been inspired by Charlie Kirk. In one of the videos shared by PragerU, a woman said she went to church with her family for the first time in her children's lives. Quote, we are raising our 3 boys that will one day be men. We want those boys to be as strong in their convictions as Charlie Kirk was. The Sunday following Kirk's death, one user on X shared a photo, apparently from a packed church in Florida, saying, quote, people were standing against the walls and sitting in the stairwells. I'm 49 years old, and I've never seen anything like this in my life, and I was so thankful for seeing it. Now, so churches, and unfortunately, I was not able to be at our church service this last Sunday. We were in the People's Republic. But churches across the United States are seeing a surge in attendance. Bible sales are through the roof. And as I mentioned earlier in the show, if you missed the Charlie Kirk Memorial, you need to go back and watch it. It was incredibly moving. For my count, it was like 4 hours, and most of it was praising Jesus and a worship event. And that's pretty much what it was. But here's the thing. I think that, and this is something that we talk about a lot, maybe not so much on the air, but a lot of the problems that we have in our country are at least partly to blame for churches. And the reason I say that is for a very long time, probably since the Johnson Amendment or before, churches have been averse to talking about any sort of politics in their church because they could have their 501c3 status yanked by the federal government. Now, I don't know. I mean, I'm sure that there were 1 or 2 that were targeted by the IRS, but many pastors shied away from events in our world, from politics. And the truth is, for my friends, that the Constitution, the revolution would have not happened had it not been for America's pastors. Lemuel Haynes, one of my favorite guys. That guy was a rock star pastor. Now think about this. In the 1700s, he was drawing crowds in the thousands. And I don't know if I have to tell you this or not, but there were no microphones back then. And he's drawing crowds in the mid to 4,000 or 5,000 people at a time. Think about that. I mean, he's speaking on a platform to thousands of people without amplification, and they're still there listening to him. This country would not be in existence had it not been for churches. But in the recent decades, churches have shied away from that for whatever reason, whether they I should say this, that being critical of events, many churches have shied away. Now, on the other side of the fence, there are lots of denominations that have saddled up with all this woke nonsense and saying that, women can become pastors and that it's okay for gay marriage and it's all this transgender stuff is okay. And your church is flying a pride flag when you can go to several passages in the Bible that say, that's not okay. But churches, many of them, shied away from criticizing any of that. And I think that you can blame a lot of what's happening in our world on churches not being involved. Well, now you've got a surge of people that want to know Christ and that want to be part of the church, and churches have to be ready for that.
Part of what's happened historically is that churches have abandoned their first calling. And maybe that's a little bit reminiscent of the first part of Revelation. But it used to be that most universities were started by colleges, or most universities were started by churches. The word Sunday school actually was for, a lot of rural people didn't have the opportunity to send their kids to school, so they would get together all day on Sunday, go to the church, and they would have school for the kids. We were responsible for educating our own children in those days. And all these things have been subjugated now to government, and government has replaced the church. And I think it's high time that things moved back the other way. If it were up to me, I would dissolve public education. I would put it back on the parents. You guys figure out how to educate your kids, because you can see what has happened over the last 50, 60 years with public education and the influence of the left there.
Ken, one of my favorite books in my library is a public school history book, and I think it's from 1958. 58 or 48. There's an 8 in it. Anyway, long time ago. And in the history book is the Lord's Prayer in 7 languages. And this, you open up the front cover and it says, printed for use in Pittsburgh public schools. Now, if you try to use that history book in a classroom now, you would probably be walked out of the front of the building, and you may even be fired if you were a teacher. But if you took some of the materials that are in our public schools right now and went back to 1958 and tried to use those in schools, you would be arrested. That's how far we've come. And a lot of it, I think, goes back to churches just being hands off. We just come to church on Sunday and we'll talk about God, but we're not going to really talk about what's happening in the world. Well, churches, it's time to stand up. It was President J.D. Vance during the memorial who said that he has spoken more about God in the last week than he has in his entire political career. And my friends, the time is ripe for churches to stand up and to do what they were supposed to be doing instead of staying on the sidelines and not getting involved. He's Lord of all or not at all, which includes politics. You got to have people in public office that are God-fearing, Jesus-loving people. And if you want to fundamentally change how our country exists today, it includes the churches.
For the churches to stand up, that doesn't mean we pawn it off on the pastors and hold them accountable. It means us. If you're sitting in that pew, that's your job. We are called by Christ to resist evil. And we have been very dispassionate at best at that calling.
Yeah, but the other side, man, they don't have that fear. They don't have the reservation about talking about their faith in public, or their lack of faith, rather. They're all about it. There's a so-called pastor and the reason I say so-called, and I'll tell you why, in I believe he's in Laramie, but he posts his sermons on his own little blog, and one of them talks about white supremacy and you need to atone for your white privilege. None of that is in the Gospels. None of that's even in the Bible. It's time, pastors, if you're listening, it is time for you to stand up and do what you were supposed to be doing all along.
Sounds like he takes more of his guidance from Ebenezer Baptist than he does from Scripture.
Yeah, no kidding. Well, I want to end today's program. We've got a couple of minutes. And, we've been talking a lot about Charlie Kirk's memorial today. But I've got two quick videos from Charlie Kirk. And the first one, he says how he wants to be remembered. And here's how this piece in The Federalist ends. It says, quote, Kirk said that he wanted to be remembered for courage for my faith. In his life, Kirk was known by many for his faith and in God's powerful plan. He's remembered by millions. So here's where he said that.
I want to be remembered for courage for my faith. That would be the most important. The most important thing is my faith in my life.
Okay, there's that one. And then here's this one. I love this video. This one always gets to me.
Very much so. Why is that exactly? Well, Jesus saved my life. I'm a sinner. Gave my life to Christ. Most important decision I ever made. So you believe the Bible is real? Yes, I believe the Bible is true and real. Why is that? Well, I could give you the technical answer. There's never been an archaeological discovery that has contradicted the truth of the Bible. And then, of course, the wisdom. There is not a truth of the Bible that if you apply to your life does not improve dramatically. And then finally, we have the most accurate and transparent, historically robust account that one can have of the most important figure ever to live in the history of the world, Jesus of Nazareth. And the resurrection is the pinpoint of my belief that Jesus did rise from the grave so that we may live. What makes Christian mythology real? So that's not mythology, but that is theology. If Genesis 1:1 and the resurrection is true, anything in the Bible is possible. You're looking at the greatest miracle. The greatest miracle is creation. And then the fact that Jesus rose from the dead. I say, how do you know that Jesus rose from the dead? Well, show me another historical piece of a story where so many people willingly died a brutal death for a lie. Every single person around him had everything to lose, and yet they went to the absolute death, from Paul to Peter to the half-brother of James, saying that Jesus is Lord, Jesus rose from the dead. Not to mention, if you were going to fake a story, you would not use female witnesses in the ancient world. In the scriptures, it said that the women were the first one to see Jesus Christ. If you're trying to fake a story, you would never do that.
There you go. My friends, from the base of the Bighorns at the Cowboy State Politics Studio, I'm David Iverson. This is Cowboy State Politics. We'll see you tomorrow, my friends. Have a good afternoon.